to another episode of Literary Gladiators, the show where we discuss and debate literature in all of its forms. If it's written work, it's game. Let's meet the panel.
Hi, I'm Larry.
Hi, I'm Jesi.
This is Dumbo. He's making a return appearance.
Yes.
I'm Ari.
And I'm Josh. And speaking of return appearances, for the first time in 5 months, Jesi is back on our panel.
Hooray!
Yay!
Thank you.
Yay!
We're so happy to have you back, Jesi.
I am really happy to be able to come back and do this with you guys, because it is life down south is busy, but I love doing this, so I always try to make time for you guys.
It's a surprise for me too, because I wasn't expecting to see you again this season.
We should have had you float in on a parachute or something.
Wouldn't that have been cool?
Or like Mary Poppins with the umbrella.
Yeah, that would have been fun.
something flashy and whatnot.
Flashy.
Fireworks.
Yeah. Oh, I love fireworks.
Yeah.
I mean, I've got all the stars on today, so.
Yeah. Very patriotic.
Overly patriotic today. I don't know what came over me. Even my sunglasses have little stars on them, so. I'm having fun.
People love America. The Big Book Bowl poll, we had another poll where each of us made selections as to what big book, which is a book roughly 500 pages or more, we wanted to go over on our channel. And the one that got the most votes is The Terror by Dan Simmons, which was Jesi's nominee. And so we are going to be discussing.
With Larry.
We're going to be discussing The Terror by Dan Simmons. Yeah, it was down to The Terror.
What was yours?
The Count of Monte Cristo.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a good one too.
It was close. I remember. I think we were off by one vote. It was one vote. That I was like,
because
yes.
I had Swan Song and I was a distant third, but it was Aerosmith was on the bottom.
I think what helped too is that AMC came out with a series called The Terror that was based on this, and it kind of did a thing like American Horror Story did, where every season's about something different, and the first season was The Terror by Dan Simmons, so I think that kind of pushed it.
Yeah, probably. The Terror is a fictionalized version of the actual failed Franklin expedition.
Yes.
From the late 1840s, mid to late 1840s.
I can't imagine that monster being like a real thing.
But
Jesi,
I mean, you never know.
Let's start with Jesi's discussion starter,
Sure.
and then we'll go swimming.
Now, I mean, I know you guys all signed up for the Big Book poll, but yeah, this is a big book. So, congratulations for getting through it. It's a lot. There's a lot of characters. There's a lot going on. So, I think you even said before it's complicated and in depth, and yeah. So I came up with what I think was a relatively simple question. Obviously, there are a lot of characters in the books, and it almost seems obvious as to what the Terror is about, this monster. But would you say it's really about the monster, or the Terror itself is the men towards each other, or the men towards themselves?
I didn't think it was about the monster at all.
The Terror is Cornelius Hickey.
Right,
but I personally think that the monster is merely a mythology created by the Homo sapien. I think that the men of that crew and the people of the area, that's something that they believe in. I think as far as understanding the work is concerned, I think that it would have been more helpful, like when we had Endurance. We went over Endurance last season. I think
that was the shadow.
Having a list of every crew member would have been helpful.
Yes.
But
Agatha Christie does that. She'll put like a list of all the people in the novel on the very first page so that you never get confused.
And that's very helpful, especially for something like this where there are so many characters. But to go back to the myth part of it, I was talking to my grandfather about the supernatural, horrific element to the Terror, and I think that he made a good point that it was just the circumstances and the situation. The cards were stacked against them regardless, because of what they were putting themselves through. I think as far as that myth is concerned, I think that it is as believable as the myths that were presented in Boy's Life by Robert McCammon. I could see where they can see something and the possibilities, but I didn't approach this in the supernatural kind of way.
I feel like it doesn't really give off an over the top supernatural kind of thing. I mean, it adds that air of horror and thriller to it. But just like you, I think, it was everything was just so bad. It was one thing after another. It was the food going bad. It was being trapped in the ice. Nothing led up like it was supposed to. And I don't know if you have looked up, because they did recently, believe it was in the last 10 years or so, they did find the they did find the Terror and what's the name of it? Yes, I couldn't think of it for a moment, but they did find their shipwrecks, and they're nowhere near the passage, nowhere near. And I understand that things move, but they were not where they should have been, and it was just so they had this kind of thing working against them kind of show up and kind of pick the people off. So
I'm gonna answer your question with a question, and that is, and this kind of goes off to what you said too. What genre do you think this is?
That's exactly what I was going to ask. Let's go down the line.
Because I know the perfect answer, but
all right,
that's. I'd say. It's a hard question.
It is.
I was thinking of that while I was reading it, right? Because it's kind of cross genres, I think.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, for sure.
I would say primarily it's not sci-fi. It can be, right? Like if you look at the creature, right? That thing probably doesn't really exist. It's probably just a but I don't think that it was
whatever it was called.
Oh yeah,
Tuvok.
I liked all the Eskimo kind of language in it that I couldn't pronounce.
I think it was the right thing to do to incorporate the Esquimalt.
Esquimalt.
That's where that was
that was the silent girl.
I guess I'd say historical fiction primarily.
Yeah, I would say historical fiction as well, but like you said, it's cross genre. I would go also thriller. I enjoyed it very much. I found it very captivating. So I guess that's why I would maybe consider it more thriller, because I had trouble putting it down.
I think this is one of the few books I've read of any length where you can start on one genre and then the next chapter could introduce a whole new genre, and I don't even know if multi-genre is actually, and it's not quite cross-genre, but multi-genre.
There are works of multi-genre.
I saw elements of horror, science fiction, fantasy. I saw historical fiction. I saw other just general kinds of stuff. There's a mystery in there too, because of all that, not knowing what the monster is, and just not knowing what all the people were going to do and how they were going to handle stuff. There's even that part that I think the part that really spoke to me the most was the guy whose name, again, sorry it's escaping me, but the guy who poisons himself so no one else can eat him.
Good sir.
Yeah, good sir. That's pretty dark, but it's realistic.
I'd agree with Larry. I'd say it's strictly historical fiction, because the vast majority of the people in this piece are real people.
Yes.
These things roughly happened as far as the chronology is concerned. The only difference is that there are things that are. What makes it fiction is that there are things that are reimagined. There's things that cannot be explained, and Dan Simmons is able to explain them, and he does a fantastic job.
Right,
because,
like the monster, for instance.
Yeah, it's not like you have the roads between what really happened and what he reimagined, and because Crozier disappeared on April 25th, 1848, and now you have to reimagine what happened after that, because once you disappear, unless you have documentation saying otherwise, solid evidence, and then there's not much else you can go off of. So it really didn't stray away into something it didn't conform into some speculative genre. It instead gave a pretty reasonable explanation.
Almost realistic, too, because if you think about it, it was only just recently that they, discovered where these shipwrecks were. So, he had to kind of sit down and really think about what could have actually happened to these people, what could have actually happened on these ships. Monster aside, what are some of the things that they would have had to face being stuck on the ice? Conversations they would have actually had. And I think he does a really good job, kind of putting together something that's almost realistic in a sense. Like, okay, I can definitely see, certain men like Hickey, needing a certain release and finding somebody dumb enough to do it for him.
Hickey was so over the top that it seemed like his character, the way that his character was created, was almost fictional. Because he was so friggin' deranged.
He was totally deranged, but the way I see it, I wouldn't say that his character was too over the top, just because you look at other survival stories where men are pushed to their brink, and here they've been stuck in the ice for how long with food that's spoiling. But
part of it's also his language.
His language.
Food/cannibalism and certain types of pleasure, they're like human desires.
To me, Hickey and Manson reminded me of Mr. Garrison and Mr. Slave.
Oh, he did remind me of Mr. Garrison.
Reminded me of Master Blaster.
It was.
You remember Master Blaster?
Well, there, Manson, we gotta get those 2 bullets out of your arm. Jesus Christ.
That's so funny. I would have never made that comparison. That's
funny.
Great.
That's what it reminded me of. The bullet part of it, when they had to get those bullets out of Manson's, and Manson was such a big baby about it. That's exactly what he comes off. He's very meek. It's very interesting how they approach homosexuality, which at this time they were sodomite. Or sodomy was illegal.
Yes.
And on this expedition, if sodomy resulted in punishment, which could become deadly. Irving was the one that caught them, which is why Hickey had the gripe with Irving.
I remember sitting there thinking, like, just believe that Irving's not going to tell anybody. Like, leave him alone. And because at the time, I'm like, who's going to kill him? Like, Hickey's going to kill him. Because, like, that's just the kind of character that Hickey is.
And at this point, like, everyone's trying to survive anyway, so why is one, like, small action so important over everyone is about to die anyway?
Because there's still that sense of...
But, I mean, that's just kind of how I was thinking throughout the entire book. I feel like everyone's going to die.
That's not what they're looking to... They didn't go out there to die. They went out there to get from one point to the other, and if they can possibly do so, they're going to. They also had this idea that if you showed homosexual tendencies on the shore, that was different from in the sea. Which, one of my favorite characters in this whole piece is Bridgens. He was him and Pegler were very close. Pegler was heterosexual, but Bridgens, and they had that one chapter devoted to him that was very nice. He was just a very pleasant, and I think he was written very well. At that time, you're not able to open up. That's the way he approached it. He would show his admiration on the shore, but he didn't bring it with him.
It was kind of like keeping work and home separate.
It's a shame that it had to be that way, but that's the way.
I have a question. I wanted to go back to the scene where they're doing the cannibalism stuff, because cannibalism, obviously is a very touchy subject, but I do have to say, like, when Good Sir, he was like, I'm going to poison myself so no one can eat me when I'm dead, and like, I'm just like, do you think he did that because he was being selfish, or he was trying to punish everyone else or dissuade them from cannibalism?
It all depends on your beliefs too, because there are Christian thinkers like Franklin. There are others that are naturalist. And then some of them, at the end they talk about the more Inuit belief pertaining to when you die, you become it's pretty much a rebirth. So grandfather
made it back into the tribe, basically.
Yes, pretty much. They were screwing him over because they told him what they told. They removed part of his appendages, and they did it based off of what they found would not be essential. They took off his toes, useless ears, and useless. they took his foreskin off. They were going to do his man parts, but they felt that the bleeding would kill him.
Yeah.
Right, and they wanted him alive because
Yes.
of the fact that he's a surgeon. And
Yeah, he was
felt
being
that they needed
he
him.
was being objectified, and he knew that. So that's I think the reason that
They kept him alive only because he had some use.
Yeah.
And anyone that felt like a lot of the characters in the story. It's like, oh, as long as you're useful to me, or as long as this is useful to me, you can survive.
But as far as the cannibalism is concerned, I think that it was the way that they.
Because I thought it was pretty.
Where you would draw straws. They were talking about the story from the 1820s where the young boy, he draw the short straw, so he was going to get eaten.
That's also referenced in South Park.
I was going to say
the second South Park.
the cannibalism too in survival stories, not just stories, but actual events such as like in the Heart of the Sea when they talk about the Essex. This is not the first time cannibalism comes up in survival situations, and it does really come down to your background beliefs. Because there was an instance, for example, with the Essex where everybody did draw straws, and whoever got the short straw was the one that got shot and gave up their life so that everybody else could eat. And it's like that's what they knew was happening. Whereas I feel like with this crew, nobody wanted to give up their life to eat or to be eaten. And if you think about it, or I guess when they thought about it, it's like, I'm not going to get a proper burial. My family's not going to see me again. Instead, these people are going to eat me. And
That was their backstop, though.
yeah, there's definitely other things going into it, but you can kind of just see the differences between the different survival situations around the world.
Another potential motive that was in Good Sir's decision could have been that he was just maybe unconsciously rationalizing a suicide because he couldn't take anymore.
That also is a very good point.
I think that's an excellent point, yeah.
But I'm wondering if anyone here has heard the story of Captain Oates. Famous story.
I was going to say, that sounds, is that the one that like mutinied again, or he was no, that's somebody else.
No. So Captain Oates, it's very similar where they're in like an area like with all ice and snow and stuff, and he's in camp and he knows that everyone's not going to survive on the food and the water and the rations that they have now. And he says to his crew, I'm going outside, I may be some time, and he never comes back. He basically sacrifices himself so that there are less people to make absolute sure that everyone can survive in the period of time that he had been. So in a way, he sacrificed himself. It's not cannibalism, but it's still the supreme sacrifice.
Yeah.
I think the closest humane comparison that you could make as far as using your body for other people's good is organ donors.
Yep, I'm an organ donor.
Yeah, I have myself that as an organ donor. Or if you just donate your body parts to science.
I'm an organ donor. Yeah. I always make sure to give organs to the church so they can play them.
Oh.
That was a really
both, or just the organs for the church?
Just the organs for the church.
Okay. But yeah, I think it depends on whether or not you feel that when they say you can't take it with you, if it means just life down here or the physical body too. It depends on your belief as to whether or not the body and the spirit are one and the same or two different things.
Like, I know in Judaism the body and soul are two different things.
Yeah, I mean, same with Catholicism, they're two different things.
Yeah.
But they're also in union.
Intertwined.
Yeah, so yeah, I mean, technically we're not supposed to do that. We're supposed to be buried. Technically, right? Because that's how that works with
of course, there's some situations where you can't be buried.
With the final judgment.
But it's important that if you can, you are.
And we have to also think that, like, at this time, too, religion was a little bit more prominent in people's lives.
That's
so
true.
they had to take that into account as well. Like, he wasn't so willing to part with his body, especially for men who didn't appreciate him. And I think if they had treated him better and it was a different situation with different people, he might have been more like, you know what, no. Because to me, Good Sir is one of my favorite characters. I enjoyed his chapters very much.
I think he would have been. I think he had his...
it wasn't
he had his personal considerations, but he was still an interesting character to follow.
But I feel like he definitely would have been that man to sacrifice himself for the greater good of better men. not so much of these men.
Yes, especially when Hickey took over. Maybe Crozier, even though Crozier was a perfectly flawed character
Which,
too.
if you guys don't mind me changing the subject, what do you guys think of Crozier's leadership in this book?
I think it was great until...
I thought it was a little erratic.
Crozier was like an unsuccessful Ulysses S. Grant, because Crozier was an alcoholic. The fact that he didn't have faith, that's beside the point. But the fact you get measured by your results, and they really didn't get much done under Crozier.
What I thought was interesting was with Crozier, right? His instincts tell him to be the strict sovereign kind of guy, right? And I use the word sovereign, right, because he's reading to them from the Leviathan, which I looked up afterwards.
Like the Book of Leviathan, yeah.
And the Book of Leviathan is a treatise on that was written by Hobbes during the English Civil War that said in order to keep people united, you needed a strong sovereign. And he's kind of exercised, right? He puts down the first mutiny, or he's got a little help from fate maybe on that, because the other crew members come with the first mutiny attempt and say, we found open water. But even still, he's got his plan. For some reason, out of nowhere, he starts letting people opt out of it. He no longer takes the throne as the sovereign. And as soon as he does that, it's like, that's when all hell really breaks loose. That's when Hickey goes off with the rest of them, and they start hunting.
I think he started off relatively strong, for lack of a better word for it, and like you said, he kind of lets people do whatever, and that's when everything kind of, I feel like if he held it, he performed, or he ordered, I guess, that punishment for Hickey. And I feel like that was a strong leadership movement, or part for him, because he as captain, that's what he's supposed to do, is, it doesn't matter if we're stuck, it doesn't matter, it was him. I felt like that was one of his stronger moments, was having that leadership to order that punishment, despite Hickey being Hickey. So I felt like he started off strong, and then especially when all the alcohol ran out and he was going through withdrawal for like a week or however long it was, he was just like, and then after that I felt like he became very all over the place, erratic.
Right.
Yeah.
Just erratic.
What I have to say about Crozier, and I'm going to try, and it's funny that I use this as an example, because it's something I think you, and probably you, Larry, will understand very well. And I compare Crozier, when it comes to leadership skills, I compare him to a guy we both know as called Mark Sanchez. And I know it's a bit of a strange, of a strange analogy, but bear with me here. I think that his leadership was kind of based off of all the other crew members, where it started out well because the crew members, it was easy to figure out what was going on and all the mutiny and stuff. And then later, when things got really complicated, he's just like, I do what I can, but I know it's not going to be enough. I just have to. And then in a way, that's kind of like the same thing with Mark Sanchez's tenure with the Jets.
When Franklin was in charge, he didn't have as much weight to carry, but then when Franklin...
Yeah, when your captain goes down, it's always a big deal.
Yeah.
No matter what the reason.
He went down in 1847, so...
Yeah, it was early.
June 11th, 1847.
Yeah. That was... I didn't know the story, so it was surprising when Franklin went down that early in the book. I thought he was going to be a major character, but I was like, I guess not.
Yeah. Now, was this book, the Tower, was this written before or after they found it?
I did look it up and I forgot. So you got me on that. I did look it up because I want to say it was
2007.
2007, yes.
So I think it was written before they found it. So that's why I'm saying I think because even towards the end of the book when they're talking about how the ice moved, the Terror and the Erebus away from each other, I think that he took that into account. I think it's great.
I think the idea of the monster was very interesting as well, and it never was quite the same each time, and you never quite knew when he was going to pop up, and just it's one of those, that's what kind of really made I'm not going to use terror because that's the name of the book, but the horror of the book, the jump scares in the book kind of came from just the monster appeared out of nowhere. But when we finally find out more about it, at the very end, I thought that was a little bit of a letdown. I was expecting, I was expecting it to be something like a regular like animal or something.
More naturalist instead of getting into it.
It was a little more supernatural than I had expected, which is why I kind of have to add science fiction to the list of genres.
I kind of liked that it
Or fantasy.
Came out of the Inuit myth. I thought that added, a little touch of, I don't want to say the locals, but,
It also combined the characters that
it made us, it helped us kind of understand Lady Silence a little bit better. And I thought it tied in well because I felt like everybody was so weary of Lady Silence. They didn't want her there. And yet she was so mysterious, but
Irving was the one that...
Irving, and he understood her, or understood her. She had no tongue, so it's hard to understand her.
But they brought.
But he didn't
was
shun
with
her.
them. He was with them, and then when Hickey was doing some naked dance, that's where he caught him and killed him, and they were able to frame it on the indigenous people.
Well, I don't think the book really mentions it, but we'll have to see. Not see, but it'll be interesting how Crozier and the Lady Silence get on.
I like how they kind of explain a little bit too about the, and I don't want to say explain it because they don't really explain it. It was just like how he ends up in the igloo with Lady Silence, and he talks about how the igloo is made. I never, I don't know about anybody else, but I never personally understood how igloos work. How can you have a fire in a house of snow? That never made sense to me. But here, it's like, he talks about how precisely it's done, how the igloo is just big enough so that the fire can melt it, but it's cold enough outside to freeze it, and that's what fortifies the igloo. And I'm like, mind blown. That's amazing. But that's how they lived, and it was always warm inside the igloo. So she could come in, take off her clothes, and just sit naked and be warm.
And it would only be possible to have an igloo up in that kind of cold weather.
Exactly.
You couldn't possibly have it down here because it has to be on average below freezing.
At least, yeah. And I don't know. I thought that was a really neat touch as well. Just like little things like that. That followed her kind of, her culture, that tied everything in as well. And that's why I think I liked, that the monster was the myth of their people that, I thought it tied together very nicely with everything that was going on.
I like that it tied in as well. I just was surprised more that it wasn't like an animal like we see every day. It was actually a completely new creature that we hear from the myth, which I think was very interesting. I just was a little surprised by it.
I like that the ship is called the Terror too. I don't know if
that
was said at all in this discussion. The ship is called the Terror.
It's fitting.
And then there's all these terrible things happening. So I just want to shout out to that. A very
the Terror
good historical fiction choice.
I don't know if they were trying to maybe find a negative word to maybe contradict, give it a reverse.
What would you rather call it, the Terror or the Titanic?
Not the Titanic.
The Terror was first, so they knew nothing about the Titanic.
Terror is copyright on that.
Let's go down the line. Who is your favorite and least favorite character? Larry?
I guess I'd say Good Sir was my favorite character. I liked him a lot. I liked how optimistic he is in the beginning and how he manages to keep himself together pretty much throughout everything that's going on, considering his lack of experience on these kinds of missions. He's not a seafaring man at all.
And he wanted to seize the moment too.
Yeah.
When they first came, he wanted to spend more time in the area so that he could, because that was his background. It was more of the biology end of things.
Right. So yeah, I thought that was all very, very good. I don't know, every time he showed up, I felt like there was a decent person around, unwaveringly. So I liked him a lot. Least favorite, the obvious choice is Hickey. He's pretty bad, and I'd probably go with him. Maybe Franklin. Not crazy about the portrayal of what would be considered the most Christian, most devout man on board. I thought he kind of came across as a fool a lot. I'd say one of those two, but I'm not going to pick one.
Okay.
See, I'm kind of the opposite. My two favorite characters, I really loved Good Sir for the same reasons. He was just a very obviously good person.
It's in his name.
Yeah, exactly. It's in his name. But I also was a really big fan of Captain Crozier. I felt like I never knew what he was going to do next. I felt like he was, unpredictable, and that made him exciting for me. So I actually enjoyed his character very much. I'm going to second Hickey. That man made me so angry every time his name showed up, and I was like, oh, this man. Not again. You gotta be kidding me.
Right.
So I definitely really appreciated the development. Even though it was a little bit backwards, like heading in the wrong direction, but I did appreciate the development of Crozier. It's kind of those flawed. I kind of mentioned this in Series of Unfortunate Events. It's like the flawed characters. The more flaws they have, and the more they feel realistically flawed, like the better I think the characters are fleshed out. I did appreciate Good Sir for the same reasons you guys did as well. Especially the way he just was like, gulp, you can't kill me now, or you can't eat me now. You know what I mean?
It was kind of a big F.
It is, and it's the kind of thing that I feel like if I was in that situation, I'd probably do the same thing. But there was another character I liked, and I might have his name wrong. It was like Brigands, that was it. Yeah, Brigands. I liked him too. Yeah, the only character I really didn't like was Hickey. I mean, he was just... Let's just say he's never going to get a Hickey at that rate.
Unless it's from Manson.
Unless it's from Manson. Yeah, I didn't. For Manson to allow that, I don't know if he allowed it willingly or unwillingly.
Well, I think it was more he was on the more, and I hate to say it this way, but dim-witted side.
Yeah, that would definitely.
Where it wasn't so much he allowed it; he felt forced into it because he wasn't all there mentally.
I can agree with that. I didn't
call him man-child.
Yeah, man-child.
That's what it is. Man-son, man-child.
Yeah, how about that?
But
what about you, Josh?
My favorites. I liked Brigands and I liked Pegler. I also liked Crozier because he was probably the easiest one to sympathize with as far as because he was just...
Yeah, I never felt bad for him.
He was very fleshed out.
Excuse me, I always felt bad for him.
He was a perfectly flawed individual. My least favorite's obviously Hickey because...
We all hate Hickey.
We're unanimous.
Yeah, because Hickey is just... he's probably not just one of my least favorite... He's not just my least favorite here, he's probably one of my least favorites overall because of his blown out of proportion ego.
Yeah.
And
I think Dan Simmons
I loved how his last words were, because he saw himself as this high and mighty god at the end, and when the Tuvok allegedly went after him, it could have either the Tuvok or a bear, depending on your beliefs. And then he got mauled.
Can we ask Dumbo, who was your favorite character? Oh. It would be Lady Silence.
Good choice, Dumbo.
Very clever.
See what I did there?
Yes.
Which, before we end this, can I just ask everybody's quick opinion, what did you guys think of Lady Silence?
I think that she was a great addition to the piece. I think that it's very important on an expedition like this to have a contribution from those that are from the area. Those from the area. I mean, if the Inuit played a role within the people being there, I think that it's important to make mention to that. You cannot ignore them, and you especially cannot treat that like in Western pieces. They will often treat the natives as not just villains and savages, but also creatures. Here they actually give them, they treat them like they are people that just live a different lifestyle.
And I think it was important to have a character, indigenous or otherwise for that matter, who was almost like when, and sometimes you see people look at someone who can't speak, or someone who's not supposed to speak, or is not really speaking, and you just realize stuff, or you get realizations and epiphanies. And with Lady Silence, I think that one of the important things is having a character in the novel or movie or whatever you're talking about, where there's a voice of reason without being spoken. So I think having Lady Silence, whether she's indigenous or not, I think it's just important to have someone who you can look at, kind of looking in a mirror and reflecting back at your own thoughts and stuff, and I think that Lady Silence was important in the regard of being a physical presence, but not necessarily a verbal presence.
Mm-hmm.
No, I don't understand her too much, I guess. She was there, but she wasn't doing much except taking care of herself for most of the time. And then at the end, she says that she was waiting for Crozier all that time, and it's like, well, how did she know that he would end up with her? And also, you know, they got the whole psychic element where they're communicating telepathically. I wasn't a big fan of that element.
Yeah.
Of the story.
Oh yeah, I wasn't sure if that was like a real thing or if that was kind of.
That's where it became a bit more speculative. Because we don't even know when Crozier died. He could have very well have made a life with the Inuit. He disappeared in 1848. And
it's up to speculation. The book kind of had to end up to speculation.
Yes.
If you want, I mean, I know it's fiction, but you kind of had to end it.
Mm-hmm. I don't think it. I mean, it's not as clear. I think, for instance, anybody know Glenn Miller, the band leader? You would recognize his song, especially in the mood. Da 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 da. And but when he was performing he would do performances during World War II. His plane disappeared. They thought that with him, the plane it ran out of gas, or the engine blew, and it just faltered and crashed to the ground.
That's like in Amelia
So
Earhart.
that's the high chance of it being that way. With Crozier, it's much more in question because anything could have happened. I think once you start a life with the Inuit, especially at that time, they didn't document anything, and especially if he felt that this was the life that he was meant to live, you're not going to get answers. But he could have very well have drowned in the water. It's all
true.
up to speculation.
Or he could have.
And I think Simmons did I think it was a very clever way. I think that as the story progressed, it seemed to be more. I think it did pick up more thriller-like elements, where it would be Crozier that went with that met up with Lady Silence. It could have been any of them. But
Did you happen to notice like a dialogue change as the book went on? Or maybe that was just the characters kind of becoming more.
I think it's the different characters.
Yeah,
That's how
because
I
I felt like the characters became the adrenaline was like heightening. I felt it in the writing.
It started out a little bit slow and then it picked up.
Yeah, that's what I felt. I meant to mention that as well because, like, I noticed at the beginning it was kind of just. I mean, even though the stuff that was
Especially,
happening
I think
was crazy.
Franklin's things even seemed to slow a little bit.
Right, but when it came to like the major points near the end, and then when they started realizing who the animal was, Inuit.
Mm-hmm.
I keep forgetting his name too bad. What happened was that like the writing almost seemed to jump out of the page at that point, like the dialogues.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought that was very interesting as well.
I thought what was interesting, too, is, all these men were struggling and, acting like this was just a barren wasteland. And then I felt like Lady Silence was a reminder that, hey, people live here. Mm-hmm. And, here you're crying because you have no food in the cans that you brought with you, and she's eating and taking care of herself just fine. Mm-hmm. And it's like, I understand, there's more people on these boats than there is she, but you know what I mean? It's like, I thought she was a constant reminder that people live in this barren wasteland, but she's surviving just fine.
I think that Simmons does a great job reminding us that this is a naturalist situation, that we as humans, and by humans I mean from upper world countries,
spoiled by the technologies.
Not only do they take things for granted, but they have difficulty fathoming that nature can care less whether you are from an upper world country, if you are from an indigenous group of people, or if you are a seal, or if you are a grasshopper.
And I think that really is one of the underlying, or one of the underlying, I just lost
messages.
Messages. Thank you. I don't know why I couldn't think of that for some reason. But what they're trying to say, it's nature, and here these men were very spoiled by how they lived. That when put into a survivalistic situation, they couldn't survive. they couldn't do it. They turned mad. They turned on each other. They like it just all fell apart when
it's not that
people
they're spoiled,
lived here too.
It is that the Inuits have a superior technology for that environment.
I see. Maybe spoiled's the wrong word, but they were not prepared to
No.
go on an expedition
They did not
somewhere
have the-
that
they
they
did not
didn't
have-
know
But
anything
you
about.
have to make
That's
do with your circumstance as
you
as it
have to
sta-
if
as
you
it
can.
stands.
If you have the ability to, then you will. But even in, toward the second half of the story, they're looking for help from the Eskimos, right? And Lady Silence isn't helping anybody. She's just waiting for Crozier. She could have kept them fed. She could have helped them beat the cold. And part of that might go into the myth, right? Where you got to keep the white man out of the north. It's not.
It could have been that
But
she wasn't feeling welcome by everybody there, so why would she want to help them just in the sort of way that, I mean, good sir had the voice, you guys aren't being nice to me, so why should I help you? All right, so maybe she had the same thought. I mean, we won't know because she couldn't speak, so I guess we won't know. But, I mean, that's like it. So she definitely could have helped them. Because she was doing it on her own. But, she didn't see a reason to help them, so why?
How would we rate this? 0 to 5 stars, half stars permitted. Larry?
I'm going to go 2 stars. I'd like to know more. I didn't realize until this discussion started that this is based on a true story. I'm not too excited about that idea because of the fact that so many, I don't know how many liberties are taken with these people and how many of them are actual people and what's done with them. So, I mean, I think that if you're going to write about people that are dead, you ought to be very careful with that. So, and without knowing how that was handled and what was known about these people.
Most of the major characters are real.
Yeah, I think Franklin, Crozier, and I don't think Good Sir. I think he was, I can't remember. I did look it up. Back when I first read this book, I looked up to see who was real and who wasn't. But I should have came more prepared to the discussion. I'm so sorry.
That's okay. I should have looked it up
didn't.
myself. I didn't even know this was a true story, like I said, so I'm less prepared than you are. But yeah, I'm going with the 2 because, not only because of that potential, what I would think would be not a very good thing to do with certain characters, but also because of the fact that I don't really like the message of the story. I think that at the end there, when Crozier's burning the ship, I took issue with that. I think that that's trying to send a message about Western culture. Not a good one. So I'll give it a 2 on a scale of 5.
Jesse?
So I'm rating it opposite. I'm rating it a 5. It's my number 3 favorite book of all time. I love it. I think all the characters are very fleshed out, and I think, he tips his hat to the actual Franklin expedition, but he turns it around in a way that keeps you interested. What happened to these people? What could have happened. He doesn't answer all questions. I feel like he keeps everything very open and kind of leaves a lot to the reader's imagination, and I think that's the best part about it. I mean, you have this mystery of what happened to the Franklin expedition, and he answers some of the questions but still leaves it a mystery, and I think that's very exciting and how it should be done overall. I don't think he blew anything too out of proportion. I mean, yeah, you have that supernatural monster, but even that, I feel like he didn't overdo it. I feel like a lot of monster stories overdo it, and I don't think he overdid it here. As far as the characters go, just kind of going off of what you said, yes, you do have to be careful with actual historical figures. But when it comes to the people like Franklin and Crozier, I don't think he portrayed them badly at all. I think he portrayed them as men in a tough situation. And sometimes we have to remember that great men in a tough situation aren't always great men. So,
what is it? Great men are forged in fire. It is the privilege of the lesser man to light the flame.
I was gonna say, I wish I had my Shackleton quote here. Actually, I think I do. Hold on, I saved all of my notes.
Maybe Dumbo remembers it.
Gatsby, endurance. superhuman effort isn't worth a damn unless it achieves results. That's one of my favorite Shackleton.
It's very, it's very Parcellian.
It did produce results, just not quite
the results that they were hoping for, but yes.
Yeah.
Ari?
I'm going to give this one a solid 3. I really like this one. I feel that the characters were definitely, they were all, well, most of them were developed very well. I mean, of course, there's Hickey, but...
and there are real bad people like Hickey out there.
I know.
There are bad people like him.
But I thought the general survival story genre isn't one I'm big on, but I'll tell you it's one of the better survival stories I've read, probably because it had all the detail in it, and it had some of the cross-genre, multi-genre stuff in it. So I think I'm going to give it a solid 3, and I would recommend it to anyone who's... hasn't read it yet, as long as you have the patience to read a longer book. Which, by the way, this is the first big book I've actually read, like big book that I've actually read. So hopefully I can do others in the future.
Yeah, this is only the second book that we've done for the big book poll. The first one was Crime and Punishment.
Oh, well,
and I think Larry's trying to get back at you for what we did to Crime and Punishment.
But like, I think for literary,
one of the greatest books ever written.
I see what happened here.
I think for literary writers,
we rated that one badly. You rate this one badly.
This might be the first one that.
Plus, you beat me.
This might be the first big book I've read for literary gladiators at any point in time. So that was not one that I suggested. I should say though that Crime and Punishment I would probably also give the same grade. But I'll talk to you about that later.
I give that a 3 as well, but I'm giving the Terror a 4. Because at first I thought that it started out very slow and didn't really engage me at the beginning, but it really started to flow once I started to see dimension within the people in this piece. I think that at first they were just throwing characters at me. I think it would have been very helpful if they had a character guide.
I will agree with you.
Yeah, and because that's
2 ships and 2 crews. Like, that's a lot of people you have to remember.
And another thing, too, is in the beginning it kind of jumps around with the timeline a little bit.
Yes.
It's a similar problem that I had with
the beginning.
It's a similar problem.
And then it settles into the timeline, but it's like, in the beginning, the most important part is trying to get to know your bearings and who these people are, and he's kind of jumping around a little bit. And
they should have went chronologically. If Alfred Lansing is able to give us a character guide for 1 crew,
the Endurance,
with the Endurance, I think that Simmons owes us the entire guide of who is on Erebus and who's on Terra.
You hear that, Dan?
Yeah, Dan, come on.
But because he put a lot into this piece. This is 955 in the mass market paperback. 955 pages.
That is long.
Lots of acknowledgments.
Yeah, acknowledgments to the Dan Simmons.
Yeah. But I think that as this story progressed, I think that everybody started picking up a sense of dimension. You began to get an idea of who they were, and
I think part of the reason for that, Josh, is because as the book progressed, there were less characters left.
Yeah.
So you're able to flush them out more.
You found out who's important and you have to pay attention to, and who's not so important.
But still, I mean, Franklin died very early in the piece.
Yeah.
So, and I felt he was important considering.
Because I know
it was his expedition, exactly.
But if you're interested in reading The Terror, here is my copy of the work, written by Dan Simmons. This is mass market paperback. And Dan Simmons has written several pieces. There is the Hyperion series.
Yes, definitely read Hyperion. That's the other Dan Simmons work.
I'm excited to read Drood. That's
Drood is another one.
Charles Dickens.
Then there was the ones you had over there.
Yeah, Mystery of Edwin Drood is Charles Dickens' last novel, and it's based off of.
This is like the mystery surrounding why it was so different than other Charles Dickens books. So I'm excited to read that one. And I think Abominable is
one I was thinking.
Another one that I want to read pretty badly.
A lot of his works are long and in depth.
They are.
Kind of like Mishnah.
What if Charlie dressed up as Charles Dickens.
No, Charlie what?
What if Charlie dressed up as Charles Dickens?
That'd be great.
Charlie dressed up as Charles Dickens. Love that.
I think it's better when he's Charlie Claus.
Maybe both.
But
why can't he be both? Yeah.
Imagination,
Possibly.
Josh.
He could be Scrooge.
He could be Charles Dickens dressed as Santa reading
Christmas Carol.
Christmas Carol.
I think it'd be better. Scrooge. If he was Scrooge,
That's pretty Christmassy.
Charlie as Scrooge would be bah humbug. Bah humbug. Where's my cookies?
No, only gruel.
Be sure to join us next time on another episode of Literary Gladiators. For now, keep reading.
Keep reading.
Keep
Check
reading.
this book out.
Hi there, this is Josh, and on the next episode of Literary Gladiators, Larry, Jesse, Ari, and I will be discussing Grief is a Thing That Wades by Daniela Tuzzi Watson, featured in Slice Magazine. If you like what you see on this channel, please support us on our Patreon, because the money that we make will allow us to provide you, the viewer, with even more great material. Thank you for tuning in, and for now, keep reading.